All right. If everything was done right, we should be live now. All right.
We're live.
We're live? Okay. Hi, everyone. This is a Vega for Congress Christmas special. And normally we do these things every Friday where we have an Edgar Poe reading as well, along with what we are planning on doing. Sorry, just give me a second here to do it. One quick second here, everyone. There we go. Perfect. You see? And there we go. Yes, okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in to the Vega for Congress Christmas special. It is 6:01 now. I don't want to take a lot of time because we have a story to read that we've kind of choreographed, so we got to go right into it. We have our friends who will be joining us, Keaton Weiss and Russell Dobular, who will be coming in a little later. We also have people here in the room. At some point, you may hear a doorbell. Don't worry, that's just somebody who's coming late. And if you're on your way here and you're listening on the stream, come in as quiet as you can. All right. So with that being said, this is also done as a way to raise funds. There's that doorbell I was talking about. This is also being done as a way to raise funds. We still have some debts that we need to clear up from the old congressional campaign. And as some people may or may not have pieced together, we have plans for something in the future, which no formal announcement has been made about yet, but something to keep an eye out for and something to have a launch pad for. But with that being said, I want to get started on the first hour of our program by reading The Spectacles by Edgar Poe. And so I'm going to begin now, and if somebody could just open the door so we don't have to keep hearing the doorbell, great, perfect. All right, so I'm going to get started now. Many years ago, it was the fashion to ridicule the idea of love at first sight. But those who think, not less than those who feel deeply, have always advocated its existence. Modern discoveries, indeed, in what may be termed ethical magnetism or magnetoaesthetics, render it probable that the most natural and consequently the truest and most intense of the human affections are those which arise in the heart, as if by electric sympathy. In a word, that the brightest and most enduring of these cycle fetters are those which are riveted by a glance. The confession I am about to make will add another to the already almost innumerable instances of the truth of the position. My story requires that I should be somewhat minute. I am a still very young man and not yet 22 years of age. My name, at present, is a very usual and rather plebeian one, Simpson. I say at present, for it is only lately that I have been so called, having legislatively adopted this surname within the last year in order to receive a large inheritance left me by a distant male relative, Adolphus Simpson, Esquire. The bequest was conditioned upon taking my taking the name of the testator, the family, not the Christian name. My Christian name is Napoleon Bonaparte, or more properly, these are my first and middle appellations. I assumed the name Simpson with some reluctance, as in my true patronym, Froissart, I felt a very pardonable pride, believing that I could trace a descent from the immortal author of the Chronicles. While on the subject of the names, by the by, I may mention a singular coincidence of sound attending the names of some of my immediate predecessors. My father was a Monsieur Froissart of Paris. His wife, my mother, whom he married at 15, was a Mademoiselle Croissart, eldest daughter of Croissart the banker, whose wife, again being only 16 when married, was the eldest daughter of one Victor Vaussart. Monsieur Vaussart very singularly had married a lady of similar name, a Mademoiselle Mozart. She, too, was quite a child when married, and her mother, also Madame Mozart, was only 14 when led to the altar. These early marriages are usual in France. Here, however, are Mozart, Vaussart, Croissart, and Froissart, all in the direct line of descent. My own name, though, as I say, became Simpson by act of legislature, and with so much repugnance on my part that at one period I actually hesitated about accepting the legacy with the useless and annoying proviso attached. As to personal endowments, I am by no means deficient. On the contrary, I believe that I am well made, and possess what 9/10 of the world would call a handsome face. In height, I am 5'11". My hair is black and curling, my nose is sufficiently good, my eyes are large and gray, and although, in fact, they are weak, a very inconvenient degree, still no defect in this regard would be suspected from their appearance. The weakness itself, however, has always much annoyed me, and I have resorted to every remedy short of wearing glasses. Being youthful and good-looking, I naturally dislike these, and have resolutely refused to employ them. I know nothing, indeed, which so disfigures the countenance of a young person, or so impresses every feature with an air of demureness, if not altogether of sanctimoniousness of age. An eyeglass, on the other hand, has a savor of downright foppery and affection. I have hitherto managed as well as I could without either, but something too much of these merely personal details, which, after all, are of little importance, I will content myself with saying, in addition, that my temperament is sanguine, rash, ardent, enthusiastic, and that all my life I have been a devoted admirer of the women.
One night last winter, I entered a box at the theater in company with my friend, Mr. Talbot. It was an opera night, and the bills presented a very rare attraction, so the house was excessively crowded. We were in time, however, to obtain the front seats, which had been reserved for us, and into which, with some little difficulty, we elbowed our way. For 2 hours, my companion, who was a musical fanatico, gave his undivided attention to the stage, and in the meantime, I amused myself by observing the audience, which consisted in chief part of the very elite of the city. Having satisfied myself upon this point, I was about turning my eyes to the prima donna, when they were arrested and riveted by a figure in one of the private boxes which had escaped my observation. If I live 1,000 years, I can never forget the intense emotion which I regarded this figure. It was that of a female, the most exquisite I had ever beheld. The face was so far turned toward the stage that for some minutes I could not obtain a view of it, but the form was divine. No words can sufficiently express its magnificent proportion. Even the term divine seems ridiculously feeble as I write it. The magic of a lovely form in woman, the necromancy of female gracefulness, was always a power which I had found it impossible to resist. But here was grace personified, incarnate, the beau ideal of my wildest and most enthusiastic visions. The figure, almost all of which the construction of the box permitted to be seen, was somewhat above the medium height and nearly approached without positively reaching the majestic. Its perfect fullness and tenure were delicious. The head, of which only the back was visible, rivaled in outline the Greek Psyche, and was rather displayed than concealed by an elegant cap of gaze aérienne, which put me in mind of the ventum textilium of Apuleius. The right arm hung over the balustrade of the box and thrilled every nerve of my frame with its exquisite symmetry. Its upper proportion was draperied by one of those loose open sleeves now in fashion. This extended but little below the elbow. Beneath it was worn an under one of some frail material, close-fitting, and terminated by a cuff of rich lace, which fell gracefully upon the top of the hand, revealing only the delicate fingers, upon one of which sparkled a diamond ring, which I saw at once was of extraordinary value. The admirable roundness of the wrists was well set off by a bracelet which encircled it, which was also ornamented and clasped by a magnificent aigrette of jewels, jewels telling in words that could not be mistaken at once of the wealth and the fastidious taste of the wearer.
I gazed at this queenly apparition for at least half an hour, as if I had been suddenly converted to stone. And during this period, I felt the full force and truth of all that has been said or sung concerning love at first sight. My feelings were totally different from any which I had hitherto experienced in the presence of even the most celebrated specimens of female loveliness. An unaccountable, and what I am compelled to consider a magnetic sympathy of soul for soul seemed to rivet not only my vision, but my whole powers of thought and feeling upon the admirable object before me. I saw, I felt, I knew that I was deeply, madly, irrevocably in love. And this even before seeing the face of the person beloved. So intense indeed was the passion that consumed me that I really believe it would have received little, if any, abatement had the features, yet unseen, proved of mere ordinary character. So anomalous is the nature of the only true love, of the love at first sight. And so little really dependent is it upon the external conditions which only seem to create and control it. While I was thus wrapped in admiration of this lovely vision, a sudden disturbance among the audience caused her to turn her head partially toward me, so that I beheld the entire profile of the face. Its beauty even exceeded my anticipations, and yet there was something about it which disappointed me without my being able to tell exactly what it was. I said disappointed, but this is not altogether the word. My sentiments were at once quieted and exalted. They partook less of transport and more of calm enthusiasm, of enthusiastic repose. This state of feeling arose perhaps from the Madonna-like and matronly air of the face. And yet I once understood that it could not have arisen entirely from this. There was something else, some mystery which I could not develop, some expression about the countenance which slightly disturbed me, while they greatly heightened my interest. In fact, I was just in that condition of mind which prepares a young and susceptible man for any act of extravagance. Had the lady been alone, I should undoubtedly have entered her box and accosted her at all hazards. But fortunately, she was attended by two companions, a gentleman and a strikingly beautiful woman, to all appearance a few years younger than herself. I revolved in my mind 1,000 schemes by which I might obtain hereafter an introduction to the elder lady, or for the present, at all events, a more distinct view of her beauty. I would have removed my position to one nearer her own, but the crowded state of the theater rendered this impossible, and the stern decrees of fashion had of late imperatively prohibited the use of the opera glass. In a case such as this, even had I been so fortunate as to have had one with me, but I had not, and was thus in despair.
At length, I bethought me of applying to my companion. Talbot, I said, you have an opera glass. Let me have it.
An opera glass? No. What do you suppose I would be doing with an opera glass?
Here he turned impatiently towards the stage. But Talbot, I continued, pulling him by the shoulder, listen to me, William. Do you see the stage box? There. No, the next. Do you ever behold so lovely a woman?
She is very beautiful, no doubt.
I wonder who she can be.
Why, in the name of all that is angelic, don't you know who she is? Not to know her argues yourself unknown. She is the celebrated Madame Lalande, the beauty of the day par excellence, and the talk of the whole town. Immensely wealthy, too. A widow, and a great match. Has just arrived from Paris.
Do you know her?
Yes, I have the honor.
Will you introduce me?
Assuredly, with the greatest pleasure. When shall it be?
Tomorrow at 1. I will call upon you at B's.
Very good. And now do hold your tongue if you can.
In this latter respect, I was forced to take Talbot's advice, for he remained obstinately deaf to every further question or suggestion, and occupied himself exclusively for the rest of the evening what was transacting upon the stage. In the meantime, I kept my eyes riveted on Madame Lalande, and at length had the good fortune to obtain a full front view of her face. It was exquisitely lovely. This, of course, my heart had already told me before, even had not Talbot told me about it or satisfied me on this point. But still, the unintelligible something disturbed me. I finally concluded that my senses were impressed by a certain air of gravity, sadness, or still more property of weariness, which took something from the youth and freshness of the countenance, only to endow it with a seraphic tenderness and majesty, and thus, of course, to my enthusiastic and romantic temperament, with an interest tenfold. While I thus feasted my eyes, I perceived, at last, to my great trepidation, by an almost imperceptible start on the part of the lady, that she had become suddenly aware of the intensity of my gaze. Still, I was absolutely fascinated and could not withdraw it, even for an instant. She turned aside her face, and again I saw only the chiseled contour of the back portion of the head. After some minutes, as if urged by curiosity to see if I was still looking, she gradually brought her face again around and again encountered my burning gaze. Her dark eyes fell instantly, and a deep blush mantled her cheek. But what was my astonishment at perceiving that she not only did not a second time avert her head, but that she actually took from her girdle a double eyeglass, elevated it, adjusted it, and then regarded me through it, intently and deliberately, for the space of several minutes. Had a thunderbolt fallen at my feet, I could not have been more thoroughly astounded. Astounded only, not offended or disgusted in the slightest degree, although an action so bold in any other woman would have been likely to offend or disgust. But the whole thing was done with so much quietude, so much nonchalance, so much repose, with so evident an air of the highest breeding, in short, that nothing of mere effrontery was perceptible, and my sole sentiments were those of admiration and surprise.
I observed that, upon her first elevation of the glass, she had seemed satisfied with a momentary inspection of my person, and was withdrawing the instrument, when, as if struck by a second thought, she resumed it, and so continued to regard me with fixed attention for the space of several minutes, for 5 minutes, at the very least, I am sure. This action, so remarkable in an American theater, attracted very general observation, and gave rise to an indefinite movement, or buzz, among the audience, which for a moment filled me with confusion, but produced no visible effect upon the countenance of Madame Lalande. Having satisfied her curiosity, if such it was, she dropped the glass, and quietly gave her attention again to the stage, her profile now being turned toward myself, as before. I continued to watch her unremittingly, although I was fully conscious of my rudeness in so doing. Presently, I saw the head slowly and slightly change its position, and soon I became convinced that the lady, while pretending to look at the stage, was, in fact, attentively regarding myself. It is needless to say what effect this conduct, on the part of so fascinating a woman, had upon my excitable mind. Having thus scrutinized me for perhaps a quiet quarter of an hour, the fair object of my passion addressed the gentleman who attended her, and while she spoke, I saw distinctly, by the glances of both, that the conversation had reference to myself. Upon its conclusion, Madame Lalande again turned toward the stage, and for a few minutes seemed absorbed in the performance. At the expiration of this period, however, I was thrown into an extremity of agitation by seeing her unfold, for the second time, the eyeglass which hung at her side, fully confront me as before, and disregarding the renewed buzz of the audience, survey me from head to foot with the same miraculous composure which had previously so delighted and confounded my soul. This extraordinary behavior, by throwing me into a perfect fever of excitement, into an absolute delirium of love, served rather than to embolden than to disconcert me. In the mad intensity of my devotion, I forgot everything but the presence and the majestic loveliness of the vision which confronted my gaze. Watching my opportunity, when I thought the audience were fully engaged with the opera, I at length caught the eyes of Madame Lalande, and, upon the instant, made a slight but unmistakable bow. She blushed very deeply, then averted her eyes, then slowly and cautiously looked around, apparently to see if my rash action had been noticed, then leaned over toward the gentleman who sat by her side.
I now felt a burning sense of the impropriety which I had committed, and expected nothing less than instant exposure, while a vision of pistols upon the morrow floated rapidly and uncomfortably through my brain. I was greatly and immediately relieved, however, when I saw the lady merely hand the gentleman a playbill, without speaking, but the reader may form some feeble conception of my astonishment, of my profound amazement, my delirious bewilderment of heart and soul, when instantly afterward, having again glanced furtively around, she allowed her bright eyes to set fully and steadily upon my own, and then, with a faint smile, disclosing a bright line of her pearly teeth, made two distinct, pointed, and unequivocal affirmative inclinations of the head. It is useless, of course, to dwell upon my joy, upon my transport, upon my illimitable ecstasy of heart. If ever man was mad with excess of happiness, it was myself at that moment. I loved. This was my first love, so I felt it to be. It was love supreme, indescribable. It was love at first sight. And at first sight, too, it had been appreciated and returned. Yes, returned. How and why should I doubt it for an instant? What other construction could I possibly put upon such conduct on the part of a lady so beautiful, so wealthy, evidently so accomplished, of so high breeding, of so lofty a position in society, in every regard so entirely respectable as I felt assured was Madame Lalande? Yes, she loved me. She returned the enthusiasm of my love with an enthusiasm as blind, as uncompromising, and as uncalculating, as abandoned, and as utterly unbounded as my own. These delicious fancies and reflections, however, were now interrupted by the falling of the drop curtain. The audience arose, and the usual tumult immediately supervened. Quitting Talbot abruptly, I made every effort to force my way into closer proximity with Madame Lalande. Having failed in this on account of the crowd, I at length gave up the chase and bent my steps homeward, consoling myself for my disappointment in not having been able to touch even the hem of her robe, by the reflection that I should be introduced by Talbot in due form upon the morrow. This morrow at last came, that is to say, a day finally dawned upon a long and weary night of impatience, and then the hours until 1 were snail-paced, dreary, and innumerable. But even Stamboul, it is said, shall have an end, and there came an end to this long delay. The clock struck. As the last echo ceased, I stepped into B's and inquired for Talbot.
Out, said the footman, Talbot's own. Out, I replied, staggering back half a dozen paces. Let me tell you, my fine fellow, that this thing is thoroughly impossible and impractical. Mr. Talbot is not out. What do you mean?
Nothing, sir. Only Mr. Talbot is not in. That's all. He rode over to Surrey immediately after breakfast and left word that he would not be in town again for a week.
I stood petrified with horror and rage. I endeavored to reply, but my tongue refused its office. At length I turned on my heel, livid with wrath, and inwardly consigning the whole tribe of the Talbots to the innermost regions of Erebus. It was evident that my considerate friend Il Fanatico had quite forgotten his appointment with myself, had forgotten it as soon as it was made. At no time was he very scrupulous man of his word. There was no help for it. So smothering my vexation as well as I could, I strolled moodily up the street, propounding futile inquiries about Madame Lalande to every male acquaintance I met. By report she was known, I found, to many by sight, but she had been in town only a few weeks, and there were very few, therefore, who claimed her personal acquaintance. These few, being still comparatively strangers, could not or would not take the liberty of introducing me through the formality of a morning call. While I stood thus in despair, conversing with a trio of friends upon the all-absorbing subject of my heart, it so happened that the subject itself passed by.
As I live, there she is,
Cried one.
Surprisingly beautiful.
Exclaimed a second.
An angel upon earth.
Ejaculated a third. I looked, and in an open carriage which approached us, passing slowly down the street, sat the enchanting vision of the opera, accompanied by the younger lady who had occupied a portion of her box.
Her companion also wears remarkably well,
Said the one of my trio who had spoken first.
Astonishingly.
Said the second.
Still quite a brilliant air, but art will do wonders. Upon my word, she looks better than she did at Paris 5 years ago. A beautiful woman still. Don't you think so, Froissart? Simpson, I mean.
Still, said I, and why shouldn't she be? But compared with her friend, she is as a rush, light to the evening star, a glow, worm to Antares.
Why, Simpson, you have an astonishing tact at making discoveries. Original ones, I mean.
And here we separated while one of the trio began humming a gay vaudeville of which I caught only the lines ni non, abbas ni non de l'enclose. During this little scene, however, one thing had served greatly to console me, although it fed the passion by which I was consumed. As the carriage of Madame Lalande rolled by our group, I had observed that she recognized me. And more than this, she had blessed me by the most seraphic of all imaginable smiles, with no equivocal mark of the recognition. As for an introduction, I was obliged to abandon all hope of it until such time as Talbot should think proper to return from the country. In the meantime, I perseveringly frequented every reputable place of public amusement, and at length at the theater, where I first saw her. I had the supreme bliss of meeting her and of exchanging glances with her once again. This did not occur, however, until the lapse of a fortnight. Every day in the interim, I had inquired for Talbot at his hotel, and every day had been thrown into a spasm of wrath by the everlasting "not come home yet" of his footman. Upon the evening in question, therefore, I was in a condition little short of madness. Madame Lalande, I had been told, was a Parisian, had lately arrived from Paris. Might she not suddenly return? Return before Talbot came back? And might she not be thus lost to me forever? The thought was too terrible to bear. Since my future happiness was at issue, I resolved to act with a manly decision. In a word, upon the breaking up of the play, I traced the lady to her residence, noted the address, and the next morning sent her a full and elaborate letter in which I poured out my whole heart.
I spoke boldly, freely. In a word, I spoke with passion. I concealed nothing, not even of my weakness. I alluded to the romantic circumstances of our first meeting, even to the glances that had passed between us. I went so far as to say that I felt assured of her love. While I offered this assurance and my own intensity of devotion as two excuses for my otherwise unpardonable conduct, as a third, I spoke of my fear that she might quit the city before I could have an opportunity of a formal introduction. I concluded the most wildly enthusiastic epistle ever penned with a frank declaration of my worldly circumstances, of my affluence, and with an offer of my heart and of my hand. In an agony of expectation, I awaited the reply. After what seemed the lapse of a century, it came. Yes, actually came. Romantic as all of this may appear, I really received a letter from Madame Lalande, the beautiful, the wealthy, the idealized Madame Lalande. Her eyes, her magnificent eyes, had not belied her noble heart. Like a true Frenchwoman, as she was, she had obeyed the frank dictates of her reason, the generous impulses of her nature, despising the conventional pruderies of the world. She had not scorned my proposal. She had not sheltered herself in silence. She had not returned my letter unopened. She had even sent me, in reply, one penned by her own exquisite fingers. It ran thus: Monsieur Simpson will pardon me for not compose the beautiful tongue of his country so well as might. It is only the late that I am arrived, and not yet have the opportunity to l'étudier. With this apology for the manure, I will say that, alas, Monsieur Simpson, I've guessed, but the too true. Need I say more? Alas, am I not ready to speak too much? Eugenie Lalande. This noble, spirited note I kissed 1,000,000 times and committed, no doubt, on its account, 1,000 other extravagances which have now escaped my memory. Still, Talbot would not return. Alas, could he have formed even the vaguest idea of the suffering his absence had occasioned his friend? Would not his sympathizing nature have flown immediately to my relief? Still, however, he came not. I wrote. He replied. He was detained by urgent business, but would shortly return. He begged me not to be impatient, to moderate my transports, to read soothing books, to drink nothing stronger than hock, to bring the consolations of philosophy to my aid. The fool! If he could not come himself, why, in the name of everything rational, could he not have enclosed me a letter of presentation? I wrote him again, entreating him to forward one forthwith. My letter was returned by the footman with the following endorsement in pencil: the scoundrel had joined his master in the country.
Left S. Yesterday for parts unknown. Did not say where or when be back. So thought best to return letter, knowing your handwriting and how you, as always, more or less, in a hurry. Yours sincerely, Stubbs.
After this, it is needless to say that I devoted to the infernal deities both master and valet. But there was little use in anger and no consolation at all in complaint. But I had yet a resource left in my constitutional audacity. Hitherto it had served me well, and I now resolved to make it avail me to the end. Besides, after the correspondence which had passed between us, what act of mere informality could I commit within bounds that ought to be regarded as indecorous by Madame Lalande? Since the affair of the letter, I had been in the habit of watching her house, and thus discovered that about twilight it was her custom to promenade, attended only by a Negro in livery, in a public square overlooked by her windows. Here, amid the luxuriant and shadowing groves in the gray gloom of a sweet midsummer evening, I observed my opportunity and accosted her. The better to deceive the servant in attendance, I did this with the assured air of an old and familiar acquaintance. With a presence of mind truly Parisian, she took the cue at once, and to greet me, held out the most bewitchingly little of hands. The valet at once fell into the rear, And now, with hearts full to overflowing, we discoursed long and unreservedly of our love. As Madame Lalande spoke English even less fluently than she wrote it, our conversation was necessarily in French. In this sweet tongue, so adapted to passion, I gave loose to the impetuous enthusiasm of my nature, and with all the eloquence I could command, besought her to consent to an immediate marriage. At this impatience, she smiled. She urged the old story of decorum, that bugbear which deters so many from bliss, until the opportunity for bliss has forever gone by. I had most imprudently made it known among my friends, she observed, that I desired her acquaintance, thus that I did not possess it. Thus, again, there was no possibility of concealing the date of our first knowledge of each other. And then she adverted with a blush to the extreme recency of this date. To wed immediately would be improper, would be indecorous, would be outré. All this she said with a charming air of naivete, which enraptured it while it grieved and convinced me. She went even so far as to accuse me laughingly of rashness, of imprudence. She bade me remember that I really even know not who she was. What were her prospects, her connections, her standing in society? She begged me, but with a sigh, to reconsider my proposal, and turned my love an infatuation, a will-o'-the-wisp, a fancy or fantasy of the moment, a baseless and unstable creation, rather of the imagination than of the heart. These things she uttered as the shadows of the sweet twilight gathered darkly and more darkly around us, and then, with a gentle pressure of her fairy-like hand, overthrew in a single sweet instant all the argumentative fabric she had reared. I replied as best I could, as only a true lover can. I spoke at length and perseveringly of my devotion, of my passion, of her exceeding beauty, and of my own enthusiastic admiration. In conclusion, I dwelt with a convincing energy upon the perils that encompass the course of love, that course of true love that never did run smooth, and thus deduced the manifest danger of rendering that course unnecessarily long.
This latter argument seemed finally to soften the rigor of her determination. She relented. But there was yet an obstacle, she said, which she felt assured I had not properly considered. This was a delicate point for a woman to urge, especially so in mentioning it. She saw that she must make a sacrifice of her feelings. Still, for me, every sacrifice should be made. She alluded to the topic of age. Was I fully aware of the discrepancy between us? That the age of the husband should surpass by a few years, even by 15 or 20, the age of the wife was regarded by the world as admissible and indeed is even proper. But she had always entertained the belief that the years of the wife should never exceed in number those of the husband. A discrepancy of this unnatural kind gave praise too frequently, alas, to a life of unhappiness. Now she was aware that my own age did not exceed 22. And I, on the contrary, perhaps, was not aware that the years of my Eugenie extended very considerably beyond that sum. About all of this, there was a nobility of soul, a dignity of candor, which delighted, which enchanted me, which eternally riveted my chains. I could scarcely restrain the excessive transport which possessed me. My sweetest Eugenie, I cried, what is all this about which you are discoursing? Your years surpass in some measure my own, but what then? The customs of the world are so many conventional follies. To those who love, as ourselves, in what respects differs a year from an hour? I am 22, you say, granted. Indeed, you may as well call me at once 23. Now, you yourself, my dear Eugenie, can have numbered no more than. Here I paused for an instant. in the expectation that Madame Lalande would interrupt me by supplying her true age. But a Frenchwoman is seldom direct and has always, by way of answer to an embarrassing query, some little practical reply of her own. In the present instance, Eugenie, who for a few moments past had seemed to be searching for something in her bosom, at length let fall upon the grass a miniature, which I immediately picked up and presented to her.
Keep it, she said with one of her most ravishing smiles. Keep it for my sake, and for the sake of her whom it too flatteringly represents. Besides, upon the back of the trinket, you may discover, perhaps, the very information you seem to desire. It is now, to be sure, growing rather dark, but you can examine it at your leisure in the morning. In the meantime, you shall be my escort home tonight. My friends are about holding a little musical levee. I can promise you, too, some good singing. We French are not nearly so punctilious as you Americans, and I shall have no difficulty in smuggling you in the character of an old acquaintance.
With this, she took my arm, and I attended her home. The mansion was quite a fine one, and, I believe, furnished in good taste. Of this latter point, however, I am scarcely qualified to judge, for it was just dark as we arrived, and in American mansions of the better sort light seldom, during the heat of summer, make their appearance at this, the most pleasant period of the day. In about an hour after my arrival, to be sure, a single shaded solar lamp was lit in the principal drawing room, and this apartment, I could thus see, was arranged with unusual good taste and even splendor. But two other rooms of the suite, and in which the company chiefly assembled, remained, during the whole evening, in a very agreeable shadow. This is a well-conceived custom, giving the party at least a choice of light or shade, and one which our friends over the water could not do better than immediately adopt. The evening thus spent was unquestionably the most delicious of my life. Madame Lalande had not overrated the musical abilities of her friends, and the singing I here heard I had never heard excelled in any private circle out of Vienna. The instrumental performers were many and of superior talents. The vocalists were chiefly ladies, and no individual sang less than well. At length, upon a peremptory call from Madame Lalande, she arose at once, without affectation or demur, from the chaise longue upon which she had sat by my side, and, accompanied by one or two gentlemen and her female friend of the opera, repaired to the piano in the main drawing-room. I would have escorted her myself, but felt that, under the circumstances of my introduction to the house, I had better remain unobserved where I was. I was thus deprived of the pleasure of seeing, although not of hearing, her sing. The impression she produced upon the company seemed electrical, but the effect upon myself was something even more. I know not how adequately to describe it. It arose in part, no doubt, from the sentiment of love with which I was imbued, but chiefly from my conviction of the extreme sensibility of the singer. It is beyond the reach of art to endow either air or recitative with more impassioned expression than was hers. Her utterance of the romance in Otello, the tone with which she gave the words "Sol mio sasso" in the Capuletti, is ringing in my memory yet. Her lower tones were absolutely miraculous. Her voice embraced 3 complete octaves, extending from the contralto D to the D upper soprano, and, though sufficiently powerful to have filled the San Carlos, executed, with the minutest precision, every difficulty of vocal composition, ascending and descending scales, cadences, or fioritori. In the final of the Somnambula, she brought about a most remarkable effect at the words, "Ah, non guinge oman pensiero, al contento ond io son piena." Here, in imitation of Malibran, she modified the original phrase of Bellini so as to let her voice descend to the tenor G, when, by a rapid transition, she struck the G above the treble stave, springing over an interval of 2 octaves. Sorry. Upon rising from the piano, after these miracles of vocal execution, she resumed her seat by my side. When I expressed to her, in terms of the deepest enthusiasm, my delight at her performance. Of my surprise, I said nothing, and yet was I most unfeignedly surprised. For a certain feebleness, or rather a certain tremulous indecision of voice in ordinary conversation, had prepared me to anticipate that, in singing, she would not acquit herself with any remarkable ability.
Do the next.
This is Robert.
Our conversation was now long, earnest, uninterrupted, and totally unreserved. She made me relate many of the earlier passages of my life, and listened with breathless attention to every word of the narrative. I concealed nothing, felt that I had a right to conceal nothing from her confiding affection. Encouraged by her candor upon the delicate point of her age, I entered with perfect frankness not only into a detail of my many minor vices, but made full confession of those moral and even of those physical infirmities, the disclosure of which, in demanding so much higher a degree of courage, is so much surer an evidence of love. I touched upon my college indiscretions, upon my extravagances, upon my carousals, upon my debts, upon my flirtations. I even went so far as to speak of a slightly hectic cough with which at one time I had been troubled, of a chronic rheumatism, of a twinge of hereditary gout, and, in conclusion, of the disagreeable and inconvenient, but hitherto carefully concealed, weakness of my eyes.
Upon this latter point,
said Madame Lalande laughingly.
you have been surely injudicious in coming to confession, for without the confession, I take it for granted that no one would have accused you of the crime. By the by,
She continued,
you have any recollection?
and here I fancied that a blush, even through the gloom of the apartment, became distinctly visible upon her cheek.
Have you any recollection, mon cher ami, of this little ocular assistance which now depends from my neck?
As she spoke, she twirled in her fingers the identical double eyeglass which had so overwhelmed me with confusion at the opera. Full well, alas, do I remember it, I exclaimed, pressing passionately the delicate hand which offered the glasses for my inspection. They formed a complex and magnificent toy, richly chased and filigreed, and gleaming with jewels, which, even in the deficient light, I could not help perceiving were of high value.
Eh bien, mon ami.
She resumed with a certain empressement of manner that rather surprised me.
Eh bien, mon ami, you have earnestly besought of me a favor which you have been pleased to denominate priceless. You have demanded of me my hand upon the morrow. Should I yield to your entreaties, and, I may add, to the pleadings of my own bosom, would I not be entitled to demand of you a very little boon in return?
Name it! I exclaimed with an energy that had nearly drawn upon us the observation of the company, and restrained by their presence alone from throwing myself impetuously at her feet. Name it, my beloved, my Eugenie, my own, name it, but alas, it is already yielded ere named.
You shall conquer then, mon ami, and for the sake of Eugenie whom you love, this little weakness which you have at last confessed, this weakness, more moral than physical, and which, let me assure you, is so unbecoming the nobility of your real nature, so inconsistent with the candor of your usual character, and which, if permitted further control, will assuredly involve you, sooner or later, in some very disagreeable scrape. You shall conquer, for my sake, this affection which leads you, as you yourself acknowledge, to the tacit or implied denial of your infirmity of vision. For this infirmity, you virtually deny in refusing to employ the customary means for its relief. You will understand me to say then, I wish you to wear spectacles. Ah, hush! You have already consented to wear them for my sake. You shall accept the little toy which I now hold in my hand, and which, though admirable as an aid to vision, is really of no immense value as a gem. You perceive that, by a trifling modification thus or thus, it can be adopted to the eyes in the form of spectacles, or worn in the waistcoat pocket as an eyeglass. It is in the former mode, however, and habitually, that you have already consented to wear it for my sake.
This request, as I confess it, confused me in no little degree, but the condition with which it was coupled rendered hesitation, of course, a matter altogether out of the question. It is done, I cried with all the enthusiasm that I could muster at the moment. It is done. It is most cheerfully agreed. I sacrifice every feeling for your sake. Tonight, I wear this dear eyeglass as an eyeglass and upon my heart, but with the earliest dawn of that morning which gives me the pleasure of calling you wife, I will place it upon my nose, and there wear it ever afterward, in the less romantic and less fashionable, but certainly in the more serviceable form which you desire. Our conversation now turned upon the details of our arrangements for the morrow. Talbot, I learned from my betrothed, had just arrived in town. I was to see him at once and procure a carriage. The soiree would scarcely break up before 2, and by this hour the vehicle was to be at the door, when in the confusion occasioned by the departure of the company, Madame L could easily enter it unobserved. We were then to call at the house of a clergyman who would be in waiting, there be married, drop Talbot, and proceed on a short tour to the east, leaving the fashionable world at home to make whatever comments upon the matter it thought best. Having planned all this, I immediately took leave and went in search of Talbot. But on the way, I could not refrain from stepping into a hotel for the purpose of inspecting the miniature, and this I did by the powerful aid of the glasses. The countenance was a surpassingly beautiful one. Those large, luminous eyes, that proud Grecian nose, those dark, luxuriant curls. Ah, said I exultingly to myself, this is indeed the speaking image of my beloved. I turned the reverse and discovered the words, Eugenie Lalonde, age 27 years and 7 months. This is Robert.
I found Talbot at home and proceeded at once to acquaint him with my good fortune. He professed excessive astonishment, of course, but congratulated me most cordially and proffered every assistance in his power. In a word, we carried out our arrangement to the latter, and at 2 a.m, just 10 minutes after the ceremony, I found myself in a close carriage with Madame Lalonde, with Mrs. Simpson, I should say, and driving at a great rate out of town in a direction northeast by north, half north. It had been determined for us by Talbot that as we were to be up all night, we should make our first stop at C, a village about 20 miles from the city, and there get an early breakfast and some repose before proceeding upon our route. At 4 precisely, therefore, the carriage drew up at the door of the principal inn. I handed my adored wife out and ordered breakfast forthwith. In the meantime, we were shown into a small parlor and sat down. It was now nearly, if not altogether, daylight, and as I gazed enraptured at the angel by my side, the singular idea came, all at once, into my head, that this was really the very first moment since my acquaintance with the celebrated loveliness of Madame Lalonde that I had enjoyed a near inspection of that loveliness by daylight at all.
And now, mon ami,
said she, taking my hand and so interrupting this train of reflection.
and now, mon cher ami, since we are indissolubly one, since I have yielded to your passionate entreaties and performed my portion of our agreement, I presume you have not forgotten that you also have a little favor to bestow, a little promise which is your intention to keep. Ah, Let me see. Let me remember. Yes, fully easily do I call to mind the precise words of the dear promise you made to Eugenie last night. Listen, you spoke thus. It is done. It is most cheerfully agreed. I sacrifice every feeling for your sake. Tonight I wear this dear eyeglass as an eyeglass and upon my heart. But with the earliest dawn of the morning, which gives me the privilege of calling you my wife, I will place it upon my nose and there wear it ever afterwards in a less romantic and less fashionable, but certainly in a more serviceable form which you desire. These were your exact words, my beloved husband, were they not?
They were, I said. You have an excellent memory, and assuredly, my beautiful Eugenie, there is no disposition on my part to evade the performance of the trivial promise they imply. See, behold, they are becoming, rather, are they not? And here, having arranged the glasses in the ordinary form of spectacles, I applied them gingerly in their proper position, while Madame Simpson, adjusting her cap, enfolding her arms, sat bolt upright in her chair in a somewhat stiff and prim, and indeed in a somewhat undignified position. Goodness gracious me! I exclaimed almost at the very instant that the rim of the spectacles had settled upon my nose. But goodness gracious me! What can be the matter with these glasses? And taking them quickly off, I wiped them carefully with a silk handkerchief and adjusted them again. But if in the first instance there had occurred something which occasioned me surprise, in the second, this surprise became elevated into astonishment. And this astonishment was profound, was extreme. Indeed, I may say it was horrific. What in the name of everything hideous did this mean? Could I believe my eyes? Could I? That was the question. Was that rogue? And were those wrinkles upon the visage of Eugenie Lalande? And oh, Jupiter and every one of the gods and goddesses, little and big, what had become of her teeth? I dashed the spectacles violently to the ground, and leaping to my feet, stood erect in the middle of the floor, confronting Mrs. Simpson with my arms set akimbo and grinning and foaming, but at the same time utterly speechless with terror and with rage. Now, I have already said that Madame Eugenie Lalande, that is to say Simpson, spoke the English language but very little better than she wrote it, and for this reason she very properly never attempted to speak it upon ordinary occasions. But rage will carry a lady to any extreme. And in the present care, it carried Mrs. Simpson to the very extraordinary extreme of attempting to hold a conversation in a tongue that she did not altogether understand.
Well, monsieur?
Said she, after surveying me in great apparent astonishment for some moments.
Well, monsieur, but then, what's the matter now? Is it the dance of the Saint Itus that you are? If not like me, what provide by the pig in the poke?
You wretch! Said I, catching my breath. You villainous old hag!
All? Me not so very all after all. Me not one single day more than 80 do.
82? I ejaculated, staggering to the wall. 8,200,000 baboons. The miniature said 27 years and 7 months.
To be sure, that is so, very true. But then the portrait have been taken for these 55 years. Then I go marry my second husband, Monsieur Lalande. At that time, I had the portrait taken for my daughter and my first husband, Monsieur Mossad.
Mossad? Said I.
Yes, Mossad.
Said she, mimicking my pronunciation, which, to speak the truth, was none the best.
And what then? What you know, the Mossad?
Nothing, you old fright. I know nothing about him at all. Only I had an ancestor of that name once upon a time.
That name? And that I for to say to that name? 'Tis very good name. And so is Mossad. That is very good name too. My daughter, Mademoiselle Mossad, she married Monsieur Mossad. and the name is both very respectable name.
Mozart? I exclaimed. And Vosart? Why, what is it you mean?
What I mean Mozart and Vosart. And for the matter of that, I mean Crossart and Frossart too. And if I think proper to mean it, my daughter, Mademoiselle Vossart, she married one Monsieur Crossart. And then again, my daughter's granddaughter, Mademoiselle Crossart, she married one Monsieur Frossart. And I suppose you say that there is not a very respectable name.
Frossart, said I, beginning to faint. Why, surely you don't say Mozart and Vosart and Crossart and Frossart.
Yes.
She replied, leaning back fully in her chair and stretching out her lower limbs at great lengths.
Yes, Mozart and Vossart and Crossart and Frossart. But Monsieur Frossart, he has one very that you call fool. He was one where the big don'ts, like yourself, and he left La Belle France to come to this stupid America. And then he get here, he went and one very stupid, one very stupid son. So I hear, though I do not yet have the pleasure of to meet with him, neither me nor my companion, the Madame Stephanie Lalonde. He is the name Napoleon Bonaparte Frossart. And I suppose you say that too is non-von their respectable name.
Either the length or the nature of this speech had the effect of working up Mrs. Simpson into a very extraordinary passion indeed. And as she made an end of it with great labor, she lumped up from her chair like somebody bewitched, dropping upon the floor an entire universe of bustle as she lumped. Once upon her feet, she gnashed her gums, brandished her arms, rolled up her sleeves, shook her fist at my face, and concluded the performance by tearing the cap from her head, and with it an immense wig of the most valuable and beautiful black hair, the whole of which she dashed upon the ground with a yell, and there trampled and danced a fandango upon it in an absolute ecstasy and agony of rage. Meantime, I sank aghast into the chair which she had vacated. Mozart and Vosart, I repeated thoughtfully as she cut one of her pigeon wings, and Crossart and Frossart as she completed another. Mozart and Vosart and Crossart and Napoleon Bonaparte Frossart. And I think, oh, no, that's you actually, Lynn.
No, that's you.
Oh, why you, oh, yeah. Why, you ineffable old serpent. That's me. That's me. Do you hear? That's me. Here I screamed at the top of my voice. That's me. I am Napoleon Bonaparte Frossart. And if I haven't married my great-great-grandmother, I wish I may be everlastingly confounded.
Madame Eugenie Lalonde, quasi-Simpson, formerly Moissart, was in sober fact my great-great-grandmother. In her youth, she had been beautiful, and even at 82, retained the majestic height, the sculptural contour of the head, the fine eyes, and the Grecian nose of her girl head. By the aid of these and of pearl powder, of rouge, of false hair, false teeth, and false tournure as well, as one of the most skillful modistes of Paris, she contrived to hold a respectable footing among the beauties un peu passées of the French metropolis. In this respect, indeed, she might have been regarded as little less than the equal of the celebrated Ninon de l'Enclos. She was immensely wealthy, and being left for the second time a widow without children, she bethought herself of my existence in America, and for the purpose of making her heir, paid a visit to the United States.
Me, her heir.
of making me her heir. Can I say that?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Paying a visit to the United States in company with a distant and exceedingly lovely relative of her second husband's, a Madame Stephanie Lemon. At the opera, my great-great-grandmother's attention was arrested by my notice, and upon surveying me through her eyeglasses, she was struck with a certain family resemblance to herself. Thus interested, and knowing that the heir she sought was actually in the city, she made inquiries of her party respecting me. The gentleman who attended her knew my person and told her who I was. The information thus obtained induced her to renew her scrutiny, and this scrutiny it was which so emboldened me that I behaved in the absurd manner already detailed. She returned my bow, however, under the impression that by some odd accident I had discovered her identity. When deceived by the weakness of my vision and the arts of the toilette in respect to the age and charms of the strange lady, I demanded so enthusiastically of Talbot who she was, he concluded that I meant the younger beauty, as a matter of course, and so informed me with perfect truth that she was the celebrated widow, Madame Lalonde.
In the street next morning, my great-great-grandmother encountered Talbot, an old Parisian acquaintance, and the conversation very naturally turned upon myself. My deficiencies of vision were then explained, but these were notorious, although I was entirely ignorant of their notoriety. And my good old relative discovered, much to her chagrin, that she had been deceived in supposing me aware of her identity, and that I had been merely making a fool of myself and making open love in a theater to an old woman unknown. By way of punishing me for this imprudence, she concocted with Talbot a plot. He purposely kept out of my way to avoid giving me the introduction. My street inquiries about the lovely widow, Madame Lalonde, were supposed to refer to the younger lady, of course, and thus the conversation with the three gentlemen whom I encountered shortly after leaving Talbot's hotel will be easily explained, as also their allusion to Ninon de Enclos. I had no opportunity of seeing Madame Lalonde closely during daylight, and at her musical soiree, my silly weakness in refusing the aid of glasses effectually prevented me from making a discovery of her age. When Madame Lalonde was called upon to sing, the younger lady was intended, and it was she who arose to obey the call. My great-great-grandmother deferred the deception, arising at the same moment and accompanying her to the piano in the main drawing room. Had I decided upon escorting her thither, it had been her design to suggest the propriety of my remaining where I was, but my own prudential views rendered this unnecessary. The songs which I so much admired and which so confirmed my impression of the youth of my mistress were executed by Madame Stephanie Lalonde. The eyeglass was presented by way of adding a reproof to the hoax, a sting to the epigram of the deception. Its presentation afforded an opportunity for the lecture upon affectation, with which I was so especially edified. It is almost superfluous to add that the glasses of the instrument as worn by the old lady had been exchanged by her for a pair better adapted to my years. They suited me, in fact, to a T. The clergyman who merely pretended to tie the fatal knot was a boon companion of Talbot's and no priest. He was an excellent whip, however, and having doffed his cassock to put on a greatcoat, he drove the hack which conveyed the happy Kelpo out of town. Talbot took a seat at his side. The two scoundrels were thus in at the death, and through a half-open window of the back parlor of the inn, amused themselves in grinning at the denouement of the drama. I believe I shall be forced to call them both out. Nevertheless, I am not the husband of my great-great-grandmother, and this is a reflection which affords me infinite relief, but I am the husband of Madame Lalonde, Madame Stephanie Lalonde, with whom my good old relative, besides making me her sole heir when she dies, if she ever does, has been at the trouble of concocting me a match. In conclusion, I am done forever with billet doux and am never to be met without spectacles.
All right. That was good. We can bring the text out now. Is John here? Is John Segerson here? Is John Seekerson here? I just want to know if he's here or not. Not necessarily that he's next.
Okay.
Okay. Well, anyway,
How about
hi
Scott?
everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Yeah. So in our program here, oh, he's here. Okay. Well, I don't see Scott on. I do see Russ. Keaton is away from his this.
Did you say John is here? He's not here.
John is here. John is here. Okay. All right. No problem. So we have here. How do you think we should do this? If you're just tuning in, we just finished a reading of Edgar Poe's The Spectacle. It took us about an hour to read or so, but given that it's in season and it's the holidays, if you weren't able to come in and on time, I highly suggest when you can, replay it from the beginning. This was our sort of gift to you. A lot of this is being done in an effort to also fundraise money for debts that were owed in their first campaign, and for a launch pad for whatever it is we may have coming up in the future. I'm going to have to replace the battery of that camera because I'm realizing it's dying, but the audio will still be heard.
Take like a 3-minute break. So
let's
that
take
John
a
can
quick
take over
3-minute
there.
break here, everyone, just so that we can go to our next musical section. And then we'll be hearing from Russ and Keaton around 7:20 to 7:25. Oh, wait, there's Scott. Actually, let's go to Scott. Yeah, let's go to Scott. There's Scott. Scott is next in the program. So, Scott, hold on. I'm going to bring you up on stage. Hi, Scott. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to explain to you what we've been up to here. Let me make sure I can. Can you just say one more thing there, Scott, for a test?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, perfect. Yes. Okay, I'm going to bring you up here. So we have a live audience here, and we're also live streaming right now on social media. Scott, I know that this was a sort of a strange request. I came and I asked you not to necessarily recite, not to give your usual "we're all doomed" kind of thing. But hold on, let me just corral the audience here for a second to come in and listen, Scott. Hold on.
Marina.
All right, it's a little crazy here because we're also having a live Christmas party here,
okay.
Scott. But basically, Scott, so we were asking people to give contributions given that it's the winter season, it's Christmas, and we're looking for a little bit of hope, and hope in the sense of what actually inspires us, art, poetry. We just finished an hour-long reading of The Spectacles by Edgar Poe. And so, Scott, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the floor. I asked you to give us about 10 minutes and a contribution of a poem. You're also joined here by our friends at Due Dissidence, Keaton Weiss and Russell Dobular, who will be going sometime in the program after you. And we have live music here. But, Scott, I'm going to remove myself from the stage, and I'm going to give you the floor. Basically, it's a Christmas special here. What do you have for us?
What do I have for you? First of all, Merry Christmas. And I want to, say from the bottom of my heart how much I appreciate people like you, Jose, and all your colleagues, everybody who has been engaged in social activism over the course of the last year. Sometimes it seems like it's an impossible task. It's like that Greek, the mythological figure with the world on his shoulders. He tries to climb the mountain. Every time he gets near the top, down he goes again. It seems impossible, but the fact of the matter is that you guys, everybody, you're out there doing the job, and it's a job that opens you up to criticism. People mock you, make fun of you. Why are you doing this? It's never going to work. It's never going to succeed. It's a waste of time. But you do it anyways because you believe in it. And so the poem that I've picked is a poem that's very important to me. It was written by Theodore Roosevelt. It's called The Man in the Arena. And I'll start. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how strong the man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who come short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And I picked this poem for you guys, for people like you who are out there in the arena, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, striving to achieve great things, often coming up short, but you were there, you are there, and you will be there. And I just appreciate you so much, especially, you know, in this holiday season when we are, you know, talking about, you know, people who are near and dear to us. So that's my poetic effort for your show.
All right, awesome.
Somebody wrote a poem for him.
For Scott. Somebody wrote a
Around
poem for
Scott.
you. Do you have another minute to just stick around while it's recited for you?
Sure.
All right, come on up here.
It's Art Murphy.
It's Art Murphy here. Again, this is great. A lot of this is done kind of last minute impromptu, and I know you have a show, Ask the Inspector, at 8:30 tonight. So I want to thank you for taking the time. Here we go. Art, maybe introduce you. You got to put this over your neck. Okay, I'll anoint you. Go for it. And then the camera's right there, so Scott can see you. And,
Okay. That's good.
yeah, that's fine.
Tell them what
Well, this was. I think you'll get the reason why I wrote this when I read it. Okay. It's in the form of a sonnet, so it's not that long. Anyway. I heard a veteran of foreign wars declare atonement for his heart of darkness, as by confessing he his soul restores. And we too hear the thunder of his witness. A warrior, obsessed with glory's thrill, prepared to kill or die by cold command, is redeployed. Tonight there'll be no kill. Just sit and wait on lonely desert sand. As stillness comes, almost against his will, he marveled to see what were the day-blind stars arrayed in brilliant light, the heaven's dome revolving, even to the setting Mars. His mind now flying like an astronaut around the moon to see our earthly home as few had seen before. This thought, unfought, astounds our valiant soldier, frees his soul. His lust for war is gone, his mission true.
Well, thank you very much. I know exactly where you're coming from on that one. And I mean, you obviously listened to what I was saying and took it to heart. And I really appreciate the poem. Jose, if there was a way to get that in text and email me that, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get that to you, no problem. Scott, I think that's all we're gonna ask of you. You're welcome to hang out in the background if you'd like to hear the.
I've got people running around my house trying to do things, so I've got to run myself.
I understand. All right, Scott, we're gonna take you off the screen now, and thank you for coming on, Scott.
Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas. Yep. Bye-bye.
There's people clapping in the back, but all right. So, what should we do next, Dennis?
John, are you ready to go?
Anytime. Okay.
Let's get some music.
Let's get some. So should we do some music, then go to Keaton and Russ, and then end on music?
Yes.
Okay. John, I would like you to. How many songs have you selected first?
Lynn told me 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So I have
right there.
Can you
What?
divide it, John?
Two
I have
Now and then another one?
two German songs, and then I've got some English things.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, good.
Perfect. All right. So here's what we'll do then. So
German.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the camera that way. So if you absolutely don't want to be in the frame, go on that side of the room. If you don't mind, you know. And John, here's what I'm going to do. Dennis, can I get your microphone? You're going to place that. I'll place it. John, put this around your neck. We tested these. You don't want that? It's just for audio.
He won't. I don't think. I
Put
mean,
it somewhere near.
it should be near. It shouldn't be right next to
Yeah.
me.
Okay, great. I'm glad because we were going to adjust the volume and everything. But all right, no problem.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, if you'd like to. Okay, John, if you would like to introduce the. Sure. Okay, we're still setting up, I guess, for the musical selections, but I want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you're just joining us now, this is a Vega for Congress Christmas special. And as you can hear from the background, there's a lot of people in the office today. We're having a sort of celebration of the efforts we've done this year. We're also raising money. We need to pay off debts. So if you can donate at votevega.nyc/donate, that would be great. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to John Segerson, and we're going to rotate the camera that way. And John, you're welcome to talk about what you're about to sing if you'd like.
I'd like to.
Please do so.
Okay. It's
We're starting, quiet.
it's useful to during this time, Christmas time, to also think about delicate things, very delicate things, also as an antidote to the brutality that's around us. I mean, I can think of the most delicate thing I can think of is the six-quartered snowflake, which is extremely delicate, and which Johannes Kepler wrote this wonderful essay about it. If people haven't read that, it's wonderful. But there's something else which is very delicate, but exceedingly strong, which is a little a poem and also a song called which is a little violet, which is extremely delicate. And this is a little tragedy, which was originally written by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, the great poet, and then it was picked up by Mozart, who decided to do something very special with this poem, which had never really been done before, which is to turn it into you can say it's almost like a little condensed opera, but at the same time, it's composed in the way that, the best way to describe it is thorough composed. That is, every aspect of it, including with the so-called piano accompaniment, is completely integrated with the idea of the poem. The idea of the poem is a joke. The idea of the poem is a little joke. It's about a young violet. She's very shy. She's a nice little violet, but very, very shy. And she's in the field, and the word Veilchen is the German word for violet. And he says, es war ein herzig Veilchen. Herzig means nice, a nice or cute, nice little violet. And then what happens is it's sitting in the field, and then this shepherdess comes along, and she's lightly going through the field. And the violet says, "Oh my goodness, I was only the most beautiful flower in the world." Then what she would do is she would notice me. Keep in mind, this is a field of probably 1 million violets that are there. But if I was just so beautiful and so forth, and she would pluck me up and she'd put me back to my breast, and if I could only be with her for like maybe 15 minutes that way, it would just be wonderful. And so, but then something happens. The shepherdess comes in, and she takes absolutely no notice of this violet, and she walks in and steps on it. The poor violet. So she says, "Oh my God!" And she's dying. The violet's dying, obviously, getting crushed underneath her foot. But the violet says, "Well, yeah, I'm dying, but I'm happy. I'm happy because I'm dying underneath her feet." And what Mozart does is a very special little turn of phrase at the end, where he adds something to it. He says, "Yeah, and it was a nice little violet. So it's very gentle, but at the same time, the way that this is done is very special. It hadn't been done before this way. It's because it's like almost a little opera in just a couple of pages in terms of the little drama. And this piece especially started off the whole explosion of the great composers. Mozart continued this, but also Beethoven and others and so forth. And this started this great tradition of the so-called German Lied, the German song, art song, which I discussed at the last event that you might have heard. Anyway, let's sing das Weilchen here. Yeah, I can do this. Okay. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Ein Weilchen auf der Wiese stand, gebückt in sich und unbekannt. Es war ein herziges Weilchen. Da kam ein junger Schäferin mit leichtem Schritt und munterem Sinn daher die Wiese herumsah. Ach, denkt das Weilchen, ich nur die schönste Blume der Natur, ach, nur ein kleines Weilchen, bis ich das Liebchen abgekriegt und an den Busen matt gedrückt. Ach, nur ein Viertelstündchen lang. Ach, das Mädchen kam und nicht in Acht das Veilchen nahm. Trat das arme Veilchen, es sank und starb und freut dich noch. So starb ich denn, sie zu ihren Füßen doch. Das arme Veilchen, es war ein herziges Veilchen. The next, again, now more German. Beethoven, this is the one, actually, it was only probably about 10 years afterwards that Beethoven wrote this song, which is called Adelaide, which is the name of his beloved, Adelaide, but it's pronounced Adelaide. And this is, you'll hear that word spoken many, many times because it's about the speaker first hearing a little rustling of the leaves and saying, "That must be Adelaide." And then he looks up into the sky and he sees Adelaide's image there, and then he looks at the ocean, the very smooth ocean, and he sees it there. And then he looks up at the vast canopy of stars, and he sees her image up there. He's seeing it everywhere. And then he's seeing it in the rustling of the grass. He's seeing it, then he hears the nightingale, and it's fluting away. And again, just Adelaide. And then he says, and you know, one amazing thing is that, and there's a change in it in the song at this point, where he says, and it's a miracle because then when I die on my grave, there's a flower is going to be rising from the ashes of my heart, and on every single little purple pebble of that, it's going to be very clearly written, Adelaide.
Einsam wandert ein Freund im Frühlingsgarten, gilt vom niedlichen Zauberlied umflossen, das durchwankenden Blütenzweige zittert. Adelaide, Adelaide, in der schwiegenden Flut, im Schnee der Alpen, in des sinkenden Tages Goldgebirge, Gewinne Sterne, strahlst dein Bildnis, dein Bildnis, Adelaide. In des sinkenden Tages Goldgebirge, in Gewinne Sterne, strahlt dein Bildnis, dein Bildnis, Adelaide. Abendlichtchen im Walzenrad entblühten, Silberglöckchen des Meisengrases säuseln, Wellen rauschen und Nachtigallen flöten. Wellen rauschen und Nachtigallen flöten. Abendlichtchen im Tatenlaub flüstern, Silberglöckchen des Meisengrases säuseln, und Wellen rauschen, und Nachtigallen flöten, und Nachtigallen flöten. Einst, oh Wunder, ein Blüt auf meinem Grabe. Oh Wunder, ein Blüt auf meinem Grabe. Eine Blume der Asche meines Herzens, der Asche meines Herzens, deutlich schimmert auf jedem Purpurblättchen, auf jedem Purpurblättchen. Adelaide, Ein so Wunder, ein so Wunder, Blitz, ach, ein Blitz auf meinem Grabe, meine Blume, der Asche meines Herzens, die Asche meines Herzens. Deutlich schimmert auf jedem Purpurblättchen, auf jedem Purpurblättchen. Adelaide, Adelaide, schimmert auf jedem Purpurblättchen, auf jedem Purpurblättchen. Adelaide.
So we'll do the second, we'll do English later, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Good, Russ.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. All right. If you're just tuning in, this is a Vega for Congress Christmas special. I'm sorry for those who were not in the room for those musical selections. You could not have gotten how beautiful that actually was if you weren't here in the room. So I'm getting a lot of head shakes of yes, that they agree with me. That really was just, thank you. And it was actually very fitting for what the story was that we read with the Poe. Okay. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go to Russell Dobular of Due Dissidence, and then I will go to Keaton Weiss. So I'm going to bring up Russell here. Russ, ooh, can you hear us? I hope so.
Yes, I hear you.
Can you say something, Russ?
Testing.
Oh, yeah, but you sound like a robot.
Oh,
I don't know
really?
if that's me or if that's you. Let me see.
Yeah, clipping.
I don't know. Yeah, hold on. Let me see. I have an alternative way of playing your audio.
I mean,
If I just bring you over here, and let me see. I'm gonna find out right now if it is by doing this. Oh yeah, it's you, not me. It's you. Yeah, it's you. Here, you want to try reconnecting real quick?
Yeah, let me go out and come back in.
I'll filibuster for a bit. I have an announcement. While we wait for Russ. Don't worry, Keaton. I know you're there. I'll go to you next if Russell reconnecting doesn't work. All right. So tomorrow, by the way, we are planning on taking action. Assuming the weather holds up, we will be distributing out in the Bronx tomorrow from 10:30 to about 1 or so. So we'll be meeting here at the office at 10:30. We'll be out in the field for a couple of hours, and then we'll come back here to the office. What are we distributing? We are distributing a leaflet that talks about HR Resolution 1021-8. This is to get the ATACMS out of Ukraine. What's so imperative about this bill is that we know, because we were lobbying with Scott Ritter a couple weeks ago in Washington, D.C., that the CIA is actually briefing people who are elected that the Russians are not bluffing, that they will use atomic payloads on the Orezhnik missiles. But the media is spinning it as if they are bluffing. So it is up to us to inform the people of the Bronx. And when I first set out my campaign back in February, I said we are going to act as if we are already elected. And that's what we continue to do here. That's why tomorrow we will be out tomorrow morning. Now, I see Russell's back, so let me see. Let me try to get him on.
Testing.
That
How is it now?
That sounds much better. I'm going to do one more test. Okay, try talking again.
Testing, testing, testing.
All right, yeah, beautiful. Okay, Russ, I'm just going to put you up on our big screen here that we have here, and I'm going to let you take the floor, and it's now yours. So go ahead.
All right. It's a very Vega Christmas here. Very Vega holiday. I'm going to be reading the first 40 pages of A Canterbury Tales in the original Old English. So I hope you all have a drink in hand and you're
Your joke
ready for
didn't
that.
fail. There was a lot of laughter in the room. Just so you get.
All right. We'll be doing some Charles Bukowski. It'll probably be more entertaining. All right. So this is called Let It Enfold You. Either peace or happiness. Let it enfold you. When I was a young man, I felt these things were dumb, unsophisticated. I had bad blood, a twisted mind, a precarious upbringing. I was hard as granite. I leered at the sun. I trusted no man and especially no woman. I was living in a hell in small rooms. I broke things, smashed things, walked through glass, cursed. I challenged everything, was continually being evicted, jailed, in and out of fights, in and out of my mind. Women were something to screw and rail at. I had no male friends. I changed jobs and cities. I hated holidays, babies, history, newspapers, museums, grandmothers, marriage, movies, spiders, garbage men, English accents, Spain, France, Italy, walnuts, and the color orange. Algebra angered me. Opera sickened me. Charlie Chaplin was a fake, and flowers were for pansies. Peace and happiness to me were signs of inferiority, tenets of the weak and addled mind. But as I went on with my alley fights, my suicidal years, my passage through any number of women, it gradually began to occur to me that I wasn't different from the others. I was the same. They were all fulsome with hatred, glossed over with petty grievances. The men I fought in alleys had hearts of stone. Everybody was nudging, inching, cheating for some insignificant advantage. The lie was the weapon, and the plot was empty. Darkness was the dictator. Cautiously, I allowed myself to feel good at times. I found moments of peace in cheap rooms, just staring at the knobs of some dresser or listening to the rain in the dark. The less I needed, the better I felt. Maybe the other life had worn me down. I no longer found glamour in topping somebody in conversation, or in mounting the body of some poor drunken female whose life had slipped away into sorrow. I could never accept life as it was. I could never gobble down all its poisons, but there were parts, tenuous magic parts, open for the asking. I reformulated, I don't know when, date, time, all that, but the change occurred. Something in me relaxed, smoothed out. I no longer had to prove that I was a man. I didn't have to prove anything. I began to see things, coffee cups lined up behind a counter in a cafe, or a dog walking along a sidewalk, or the way the mouse on my dresser top stopped there with its body, its ears, its nose. It was fixed, a bit of life caught within itself, and its eyes looked at me and they were beautiful. Then it was gone. I began to feel good. I began to feel good in the worst situations, and there were plenty of those. Like, say, the boss behind his desk. He is going to have to fire me. I've missed too many days. He is dressed in a suit, necktie, glasses. He says, I am going to have to let you go. It's all right, I tell him. He must do what he must do. He has a wife, a house, children, expenses, most probably a girlfriend. I am sorry for him. He is caught. I walk onto the blazing sunshine. The whole day is mine temporarily, anyhow. The whole world is at the throat of the world. Everybody feels angry, shortchanged, cheated. Everybody is despondent, disillusioned. I welcomed shots of peace, tattered shards of happiness. I embraced that stuff like the hottest number, like high heels, breasts, singing, the works. Don't get me wrong. There is such a thing as cockeyed optimism that overlooks all basic problems just for the sake of itself. That is a shield and a sickness. The knife got near my throat again. I almost turned on the gas again. But when the good moments arrived again, I didn't fight them off like an alley adversary. I let them take me. I luxuriated in them. I made them welcome home. I even looked into the mirror once, having thought myself to be ugly. I now liked what I saw. Almost handsome, yes. A bit ripped and ragged, scares, lumps, odd turns. But all in all, not too bad. Almost handsome. Better at least than some of those movie star faces like the cheeks of a baby's butt. And finally, I discovered real feelings of others, unheralded. Like lately, like this morning. As I was leaving for the track, I saw my wife in bed, just the shape of her head there. Not forgetting centuries of the living and the dead and the dying, the pyramids, Mozart dead, but his music still there in the room, weeds growing, the earth turning, the tote board waiting for me. I saw the shape of my wife's head, she so still. I ached for her life, just being there under the covers. I kissed her in the forehead, got down the stairway, got outside, got into my marvelous car, fixed the seatbelt, backed out the drive, feeling warm to the fingertips, down to my foot on the gas pedal. I entered the world once more, drove down the hill, past the houses full of empty people. I saw the mailman, honked. He waved back at me. Because when people think Christmas, they always think Charles Bukowski. So that was one of his classics there.
All right. Thank you, Russell.
You're welcome.
All right. If you're just tuning in, that was Russell Dobular of Due Dissidence reciting a poem. And now we're going to go to something a little more hopeful with Keaton Weiss.
It's a very hopeful poem.
You got a 6 years.
So,
Anyway,
so Jose asked me. He says, "Hey, do you want to do a poem for our holiday celebration?" I said, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Okay, it has to be clean and optimistic." And I'm like, that's like asking somebody, do you want to come to my New Year's Eve party? Yeah, sure. Okay, great. We'll see you there. By the way, it's BYOB. Like, you spring that on me after the fact. But anyway, I did find something that I like very much. So this is a poem called "Can't Nobody Hold Me Down" by Sean Combs. I hope everybody enjoys this. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
No, actually, so I crowdsourced this a bit, and Jose pitched this one to me. And this is "Hope is the Thing with Feathers" by the great Emily Dickinson, who I have a couple of connections to this poem. One I don't like very much, which is the fact that she lived in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is where I spent my very brief academic career and have really no good memories of. But the second is actually that my wife Amanda has a tattoo of the word hope with a feather under it right on her wrist. So that's actually in reference to this poem. So this is actually a great pitch by Jose.
I knew that.
What's that?
I knew that. Pitching it to you.
Oh, okay. You knew that.
I didn't actually, but
your wife has ink.
I didn't know you hacked the baby monitor in our second bedroom there, Jose. Good to know. And actually, I have two. I mean, this one is a short one, but then I have one that is, not a long one. But I should probably do two since this one is a very short poem.
Wait. Which way? Wait. Are you doing the one that you pitched to me earlier?
No, Can't Nobody Hold Me Down. No, I'm kidding. No, I have another one called Dear Husband, which is one that my wife made. My wife framed this for me for my birthday, and that's a very hopeful poem. That's a very hopeful poem. And Jose, you'll find that one very, very sweet, since you and your movement are really fighting the New World Order depopulation agenda. You're very pro-child and pro-family, and that's a very pro-family, very wholesome and sweet pro-family poem that I think really fits the tone of the evening. So I'll do that one
You're not
next.
Trojan horsing like Sean Combs, right? That's not what's going on.
No, I promise. Here it is. Look, she
Do
made this up
it.
for me for my birthday.
it.
She made this up for me for my birthday. I have it in a frame, and I thought, you know what? Let me read this one.
right,
Because
go ahead.
I haven't read it yet, but it looks like okay. I thanked her for it and gave her a nice kiss, but I actually haven't read it yet, so we'll see what's in it in a minute. But all right, so this is "Hope is the Thing with Feathers" by Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. So that's Hope is the Thing with Feathers. Now this poem, the second one, is called Dear Husband, the Future Can Wait. All right, and this was given to me for my birthday, and I read this in all sincerity for the first time. There's a life in the future with little faces in photo frames instead of before our eyes. Artwork and ABC magnets won't adorn our fridge, and these old leggings I'm wearing right now will be long gone. There's a bed big enough where little elbows and knees won't prod us in our sleep, and only our feet will swing out in the morning. There's a vase placed in reach of little arms because there aren't any, and mugs will daringly sit on the edge of the table. There's a bank balance that looks a bit more forgiving, a bag I leave with that isn't overflowing, and it will only take us 10 seconds from the door to the car. There's a free calendar that isn't packed with swimming lessons, dance classes, and muddy sports shoes. And we'll get to know each other for a third time, before them, with them, and then when only 2 jackets hang at the door. There's a clean car. The only noise is the hum of the radio. There will be no endless questions in a high-pitched voice from the back seat. There may be even days when we don't hear from them at all. There's a date night with no curfew. My mom's not needed for babysitting, and we aren't sleeping with one eye open waiting for the shuffle of feet down the hallway. A type of freedom that feels heavy. There's a house that's clean. Maybe our couch is new, and we aren't stepping on Lego or toy cars either. In fact, there's not much color anywhere. Remember how we hated all of the color? Remember how it came with so much happiness. There's a dinner table that feels big. We aren't negotiating bites of vegetables or wiping little hands and mouths. But sometimes there's a knock on the door and the table is full once more. There's a shower that doesn't sound like baby cries. A coffee that is warm, and my body will be my own. We won't wear tired the same way, but we will have aged us time will have aged us anyway. There will be hard moments to come that will make these moments look easy, but we'll remember. We'll remember the first words, the curls, the I love yous, the moments we almost broke, and how we held each other through it. We'll laugh and we'll cry just like we did then. There's a life in the future, and it's coming for us every day. So let's get swept up in the beautiful chaos in front of us. Let's make the future wait a little longer, because I love this life with you so much. This one right now. That's Dear Husband by Jessica Ulrichs.
That was really good, Keaton. All right. As much as I would love to...
That's what she thinks.
It's all about the Benjamins by Sean Combs.
As much as I would love to revel with you guys more, and that was really good, Keaton. Thank you for that. And Russ, we've only got a few minutes left in the program before we have to go to our next thing. So I'm sorry to cut you guys off early, but I have to go to the next program. But thank you guys again for coming on.
Thank you. Proud of you, man.
Thank
what a
you.
great job this year. And I love your sweatshirt. That's
Thank
amazing.
you. All right, kind of get them off
Have
the
a
screen.
great night, folks.
Yeah. No. Okay, all right. So we're going to go right to our campaign manager, Lynn Speed, and then we'll finish off the day with John. We are pressed for time, Lynn, so try your best to keep this brief, but go for it. Oh, and fun. Go ahead, Lynn. You got it.
Do you want to say that now?
No, go for it. You got it.
Okay.
Go for it.
Can we get the?
You're on.
Oh, I need the picture.
Oh, yeah.
That's the whole.
Yeah, I have it.
Okay, and then you're gonna have to. There we go. And then and then solo the picture. There we go. Okay, perfect.
Are we going to lower the light?
Yes, we can do that. I can do that. All right.
Okay, I think people, I think that's still okay. I think people recognize this image. This is Washington's crossing 248 years ago, this December 25th, Christmas Day. In the evening, Washington, of course, does the famous crossing of the Delaware and the raid on the Hessian grouping, and that turned the tide of the American Revolution. And really, in many ways, that decisive action sealed the victory and the creation of the American Republic. This was a very perilous situation. And as we said in our invitation to this party, that sometimes it's in the depths of despair and hopelessness that you can conceive of an idea and act on that idea that can change the course of history. So I just want to, this really is going to also inaugurate a year-long process that we will be involved with the Jose campaign, with the Schiller Institute, and so on a true celebration of the American Revolution, not which is a right-wing conservative, everything that was done was right, slavery was right, the worst things, indentured servitude was right, etc., or with the counterpole of the woke leftism that says everything was wrong. What we're going to be involved in is an actual investigation in pursuit of the truth. And this painting, I just wanted to highlight this because many people have criticized Leutz's painting. It's not accurate. The river didn't look like that. The boat isn't right. People are not right. It absolutely captures the spirit and the variety of people that were involved and made up the American Revolution. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of people, a couple of things real quickly. There, of course, is Washington. There's James Monroe, also one of our presidents. Ironically, Monroe was one of the very few people seriously, almost mortally wounded in the Battle of Trenton. Very few people were wounded. And he was saved, his life was saved by a physician who had been recruited the night before. So those of you who are new to the fight, that's how we're doing it. Or as we go out tomorrow to recruit more people. You can see every array of a type of person in this picture. In the front of the boat is a Western rifleman, and you can tell by the hunting shirt and also deerskin leggings that he's wearing. Here you have a newly arrived Scottish immigrant with a Balmoral tartan hat on. And here, if you look closely, and many people never see this, is a Black American. Some people say that this is Prince Wimple, but what we do know is that he has on, that he is a Marblehead fisherman. This was the unit, the Marblehead fishermen, that saved Washington's army many, many times in the Battle of Brooklyn. And these were the very, very skilled seamen that made up Colonel Glover's unit, which was integrated. Merit and rank in this particular unit was, because people were out at sea and it was very dangerous, was done by intelligence and courage and skill. So there were many Black Americans, free blacks and also escaped slaves. Many Native Americans were involved in that unit. And there he is. That, of course, is Washington Monroe. This is a member of the Smallwood's silk stocking Maryland Regiment. I'm not going to say that much, but they were extremely wealthy. But these are people that took seriously the idea of giving their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor. Many of them, I think over 90% of their regiment was killed in the various heroic battles that they withstood. And here is a prosperous Baltimore merchant. You can tell that by the way that he's dressed. What happened?
What do I do? Oh, did someone just move the? I got it.
Oh, the Mac.
Okay.
For those at home who are confused, because they're still seeing the image.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We lost the image for a second, but it'll be back.
There is.
Okay. All right. Here in the front, you have an androgynous figure who could be a woman. And there were many, many women who were involved in the revolution, including several who disguised themselves as men and who fought. Behind her is a soldier in full dress. That's very unusual. I mean, that's really done as just a representation, because most people were like these two guys who are farmers, probably from Pennsylvania. They very tattered. There are all kinds of stories that you could tell where the army was marching, because the snow and the ground was filled. This is in the middle of course, of a nor'easter, and there are ice chunks in the water. But one guy is very badly wounded, and they're sitting there. Here's another Western rifleman, but this one, you can tell by the features, the nose, and also the moccasins. I don't know how clear it is on the picture, but he's a Native American. So you've got 12 people in the boat. Some people say 13 because there's an unknown. There's a weapon over here, but you can't see the figure. But this is really, we're all in the same boat. And you had, and this is a true representation of the different people, new immigrants, Black Americans, Scots, Irish, Native Americans, etc., that were all fighting. They may have had a different notion of it, but they were all fighting fundamentally for freedom. So there's much more of this, and I hope that many of you here and online might come to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where we can stand and look at this in person. Those of you who've only seen a replica, it's 21 feet by 12. It's beautiful. So I'm going to end there, since we've got to move to our final selection, and thank you.
Can we get the lights turned on? Thank you. All right. All right. So we are going to now go to our final selection of music. If you are just tuning in, this is a Vega for Congress Christmas special. We started out by reading Edgar Poe, The Spectacles. Then we heard from Scott Ritter. We had some music from John Segerson. Then we heard from our friends at Due Dissidence. Then we just heard Lynn Speed give a very, very, very short lecture on Washington crossing the Delaware. And we are doing this all to raise funds. So we need money to help pay off some old debts and to platform us for our next venture. With that being said, I'm going to turn things back to our friend John Segerson for our final musical selections. So I will turn the camera over this way, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in. By the way, if you're watching at home, Diane Sayre is live streaming right now too. So if you want somewhere to go after this, go check out the symposium that Diane Sayre is doing. So anyway.
Okay, just a few words. First, an apology that we had to pull this together quite quickly, so it's not perfectly polished.
That's for sure.
This is 4 pieces from Roland Hayes's song cycle of the Life of Christ. For those of you that know, Roland Hayes was next to Marian Anderson, the the 20th century's probably greatest African American singer, but also the people who came after Roland and Marion were also people who Lyndon LaRouche and myself also worked with quite closely. People like William Warfield, Robert McFerrin, Sylvia Olden Lee. These people were had a great influence on me and on other people who worked with LaRouche for a long time. These songs were sung by Roland Hayes as a way of creating a kind of a classical tradition in the United States and in the English speaking world, which is drawing on the classical implications of the African American spiritual. They are about the life of Christ. And I just want to read you just one paragraph from what Roland Hayes says about them. He says, it is curious how in our times, such religious poetic creations as the Hebrew chant, Palestrina, Lassus, Gregorian chant, the great masses of Bach, Beethoven, the monumental biblical oratorios, like the Handel Messiah or something, the religious folk songs of my people have become concert fare and sometimes museum pieces that we study with the rational, abstract aloofness of the scholar and the student. Yet, it would seem to me that only in finding our way back to the simple truth to which these human documents testify can we find the key to the spirit inherent in them. By lending our ear to the continuity, perseverance, and simple feeling in them, we may find, as the artist in his quest for perfection, that heartstring of their meaning, with which lives the meaning of the words of Christ.
Prepare me one body, I'll go down, prepare me one body like a man, I'll go down and die. The man of sorrow, sinner, see, I'll go down. He died for you and he died for me. I'll go down and die. Prepare me, Lord, one body. Prepare me one body like a man. I'll go down and die. Sister Mary had but one child, born in Bethlehem, and every time the baby cried, she'd rocked him in a weary land. She'd rocked him in a weary land. Oh, three wise men to Jerusalem came. They traveled very far. They said, where is he, born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star. King Herod's heart was troubled. He marveled, but his face was grim. He said, tell me where the child may be found. I'll go and worship him. I'll go and worship him. Sister Mary had but one child, born in Bethlehem. And every time the baby cried, she'd rocked him in a weary land. She'd rocked him in a weary land. An angel appeared to Joseph and gave him this command. Arise, ye take your wife and child, go clean to Egypt land. For yonder comes old Herod, a wicked man and bold. He's slaying all the children from 6 to 8 days old. From 6 to 8 days old. Sister Mary had but one child, born in Bethlehem. And every time the baby cried, she'd rocked him in a weary land. She'd rocked him in a weary land. Little boy, how old are you? Little boy, how old are you? Little boy, how old are you? Sir, I'm only 12 years old. This little boy had them to remember that he was born the 25th of December. The lawyers and doctors were amazed and had to give the little boy the praise. Little boy, how old are you? Little boy, how old are you? Little boy, how old are you? Sir, I'm only 12 years old. The lawyers and doctors stood and wondered as though they had been struck by thunder. And they decided while they wondered that all mankind must come under. Little boy, how old are you? Little boy, how old are you? Little boy, how old are you? Sir, I'm only 12 years old. And the last time the little boy was seen, he was standing on Mount Olivet Green. And when he dispersed all the crowd, he entered up into a cloud. Little boy, how old are you? Little boy, how old are you? Little boy, how old are you? Sir, I'm only 12 years old. A live a humble yourself. The bell's done wrong, I live a humble yourself. The bell's done wrong. Glory and honor, praise the Lamb. Oh, my Lord's done just what he said. My Lord, he's pleased the sick and he raised the dead. I live a humble yourself. The bells done rung. Did you ever see such a man as God, who gave up his son for to come and die? He gave up his son for to come and die, just to save my soul from the burning fire. To live a humble yourself. The bell's done rung. Glory and honor, praise the Lamb. I live a humble yourself. The bell's done rung. I live a humble yourself. The bell's done rung.
Okay. All right. That is bringing our Vega for Congress Christmas special to a close, at least online. We are going to continue. Oh, is there a yellow box around my face? That's a little weird. Sorry for the people on the internet who are seeing that, but it'll go away in a minute. Being a cameraman, producer, and everything of the show, things get a little wonky. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this Christmas special. It was the first of its kind that I've ever done before, so forgive any technical glitches. I would encourage you strongly, if you're at home, what we are about to do here in the room is we are about to watch Diane Sayre. She's doing a symposium right now. So go to the YouTube channel, Diane Sayre. She's giving a Friday night symposium. She does those every Friday night at 8 o'clock. Strongly recommend go there now if you need somewhere to go. And before we completely sign off, I want to make one more pitch. Please donate to the best that you can, and do it now, because we need this presumably before the new year. But you can go to votevega.nyc to donate if you were moved by anything you heard tonight. Assuming you were here from the beginning, please do so. And thank you for tuning in. And so with that, we are now going to kill the stream, and I'm going to keep filibustering until we are